Hello again, everybody. This is Mr. Everything. I'm coming at you with a Let's Talk video. This is going to be Let's Talk about Traveler. What I want to talk about is not anything specific, and the game footage that you're seeing in front of you right now is actually from Star Citizen. I'm actually live playing in Star Citizen, looking around my little cockpit here of my vehicle, and that's me right there, you know, and that's, I got like a little all-terrain vehicle here. But this is from the up-and-coming science fiction computer game called Star Citizen, so don't get them confused. But Traveler is a pen and paper role-playing game. What I'm trying to do here is basically just talk about what Traveler is, this pen and paper RPG, and you can watch the visuals as we as I talk. All right, so let's talk about what is Traveler. Can you even hear me when this thing's going? Probably not. Let's turn that way down. Traveler is a pen and paper role-playing game that came out in the late 70s, right? About the same time as the original Dungeons & Dragons. Traveler came out in some really small, they called them the little black books. There was 3 black books and one, you know, for the role-playing game. And these little black books came in a little box set. And that box set was only about 5 by 8 inches, right? And these little pamphlet books were in there, and it's a D6 game. So everything done was rolled on either 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 6-sided dice. And then Dungeons and Dragons had a little bit of a different philosophy, where you had to have special polyhedron dice, which you needed like a D20, a D8, a D12, etc. Right? Okay, some people would say that having the polyhedron dice, like a D12, getting a number between 1 and 12, is better than rolling 2d6, getting a number between 2 and 12. Well, there's a little bit of philosophy going back and forth saying that you know, a D20 to hit system's a lot better than a 2d6 hit system, and I'm going to have to disagree in that to get a 2 or a 12 is extremely hard with 2d6, right? It's 1 out of 36 chance. Where on a D20, to get a 1 or a 20 is a 1 in 20 chance. So it's super easy. Where so if you were looking for like 12, the odds are so low, but you're more likely to get a medium number like a 7 or a 6 or an 8, where in a D20 system you have the same chance to get a 2 as you do to get an 11 or a 20. Doesn't matter. It's all 5% chance, right? And rolling a D20 is like rolling percentile dice, just in 5% increments. Okay, so I'm digressing. But so Traveler uses a 2d6 system, which is much different than the D&D system. So a lot of people are very familiar with D&D, especially if you're a classic role player. But if you're not a role player, if you're just getting into gaming, everybody in the universe has D6 laying around. If you got a Monopoly set, you got D6. If you got Risk, you got D6. D6s are like the easiest dice to come by. So I'm lost. No, so it's just very easy to come by the dice. Okay, but let's talk about the see, now I use D&D as a reference because a lot of role players are familiar with Dungeons & Dragons. Dungeons & Dragons is kind of like the cornerstone, the not the epitome, but the the central pillar of what role playing is, right? And a lot of people have never heard of this game called Traveler. Some people have never heard of a game called Call of Cthulhu or Paranoia or some of these other games, right? All these other games have different philosophies on how the dice are rolled, how the characters are made. They also have, what's most important, a different world that you're playing in. When you're playing in D&D, you're usually, not always, but you're usually playing in a fantasy setting with dragons and dungeons, i.e. the name, but like orcs and swords and crossbows and stuff like that. And that's and then you have kings and damsels in distress and stuff like that, where these other games, not just Traveler, but these other games would have, this is exciting, they would have a different story. Like Call of Cthulhu might have like a horror mystery type story, where like Paranoia might have a science fiction post-apocalyptic style story. And what Traveler is, and how it differs from a lot of these other games, is that it is a galactic spanning, science fiction in the far future, where you're doing adventures as like a anything really. You could be pretty much any type of character that you are familiar with from any science fiction. So imagine like Star Wars. You could definitely do a Star Wars game using the Traveler rules. Super easy. And then you could also do Firefly, or you could do Stargate, or you could do what are some of these other, you could do Battlestar Galactica. You could pretty much do any kind of science fiction story could be done using the Traveler rules. But what the Traveler rules traditionally, and this is not the way it has to be done, but traditionally, Traveler is run where you get a party of adventurers, players, sitting around a table, 4 to 6 players, and a referee running the game. They don't call him a dungeon master because there's no dungeons to master. You're refereeing the universe, so you're just called the referee. Well, those 4 to 6 players are usually, and this does not have to be this way, but they're usually a crew of a small merchant ship, like the Serenity, right? Or maybe like the Millennium Falcon or something like that. They're a crew on board a ship that goes from planet to planet, from system to system, exploring or carrying cargo. Like they'll buy it cheap at one planet and they'll sell it expensive at another planet. Like maybe they'll pick up some water on a water world and they'll take it to a desert world and they'll sell it, right? Because they'll make a fortune that way. And that's how the players make money usually. Now, I say usually because there's a lot of different variations of this, but so that they can pay for the mortgage on their ship. You said mortgage? Yes, I said mortgage. Traveler takes a lot of inspiration from the real world. Surprise, surprise, right? So you have guns, like a rifle, and it shoots a bullet. And then you might also have, crazy enough, a sword. You might have vac suits. You might have computers. You might even have a flashlight or a rope and a grappling hook. Basically, you'll have anything that you would normally expect. Now, Traveler also attaches what's called a technology level to its equipment, okay, and worlds. So a world that can produce high-tech items would have a higher technology level than, let's say, a barbarian world where all they have are barbarians carrying swords, right? And so if you go to a barbarian world and you're carrying a laser rifle, you're pretty much going to be able to take care of business. But those barbarians are probably extra strong and have a good reflexes and things like this, which would allow them to take more punishment, or they would know the planet better than you and they'd be able to sneak around and stealth and do all this stuff. Now, I'm not going to get into the minutia of like rolling dice and taking damage. That's actually going to be in my video where I go over the new Mongoose rules, which I'm actually going to do that soon, probably the next couple of days. So I'm not going to talk about the rules per se, but I do want to talk about the general feel of the game, the atmosphere, and like the genre itself. Not the genre, the what do they call it? Like the theme of Traveler. Okay, so Traveler has gone through a bunch of different iterations, right? Editions, if you'd like to call them. They've also gone through a bunch of different publishers. So the original publisher, which is Game Designers Workshop, GDW, they made the Little Black Books, but they also made Mega Traveler. Mega Traveler was okay. To be able to understand the different editions, you need to understand the culture or the history behind what's going on in the Traveler universe. And the reason why I say that is because in each edition they made changes to what's going on in the history of the universe. So let's talk about what's going on in the universe. From the very beginnings of the Black Book, you have an empire, and you have alien empires, confederations and things like that surround the empire. And you as a player are playing a character from the empire. Now, yes, you could play aliens, you could play different, but usually 99% of the time the players are assumed to be imperial humans, and aliens are supposed to be rare or special. So a lot of referees won't have players playing aliens until like it becomes important for them to be able to do that. I don't want to go into all that, but just assume that you're playing a human inside this galactic empire, and this empire is not like Star Wars. That's kind of the most famous empire that we hear about today. But imagine something like Babylon 5, where you got the Human Federation or something like that, where or think of Halo, where you have the United Nations, right? So these would all be considered the empire in Traveler, except the empire in Traveler spans thousands of worlds, literally thousands of solar systems and thousands of worlds. Now, Mark Miller, the designer of Traveler, took a lot of inspiration from real science. So worlds, systems, animals, all are realistic. So the orbits would be realistic, the atmospheres would be realistic, the gravities would be realistic. Everything would be, he attempted to make everything as real as he could according to the late 70s, right? And so you have guns and swords, and there are lasers, and there is plasma, and you have hand grenades and all that kind of stuff, right? But the planets, when you go to generating planets and animals and how much water there is on the planet and what its gravity's like, how much heat the sun gives off, things like that. I know it seems crazy, but that's all put in these 3 little black books. And so you're a member of the Empire, which is kind of like the police force of space between the systems. Each system has their own government and their own government officials and things like that. Let's turn the lights off. There we go. So it has their own government officials and stuff like that. But the Empire protects those worlds. And so anything like if a hostile alien was to attack, the Empire would be there to defend the planet, right? Or it would defend its citizens from pirates and things like that. So they're not considered to be the evil empire of Star Wars. You know, they might be considered the Republic, you know, but without and kind of like the Republic in that each planet has its own government, and they have representatives that talk to the Empire, so kind of like that. Okay. So you play a character. You go on these adventures, and these adventures can be as simple as I need you to carry this secret device from this one experimental laboratory to the next planet and hide it inside this box so that an agent can come from another organization can come pick it up, and will pay you like 100,000 credits to do this. And a lot of players, you know, say, "Ooh, 100,000 credits," and they'll take it, and that's cool, and they'll do it. And then halfway through, you know, the referee will throw in some kind of thing like, "You've been discovered," and they're searching your ship. You know, there's a customs investigation or anything like that, and your imagination can go wild. You're not, the referee and the player's imagination is not limited. Don't put yourself, you know, into a closed box. You got to think outside the box sometimes, you know, and that's what an adventure would be like in first edition Traveler. Okay, then there was Mega Traveler. Mega Traveler came out in '87. It was like 10 years later, and when it came out, the story had changed in Traveler. It had been building. The story had been building over the 10 years. They actually put out magazines monthly that would have little news snippets, what's going on throughout the Empire and stuff like that. And, you know, the writing was on the wall. What had happened was the Emperor was killed, and all the dukes that would be king, you know, all started warring amongst themselves to be the next emperor. And that was what was called the Shattered Empire, or that's what they called Mega Traveler. And then from there was something called the New Era. Okay, so after Mega Traveler ended, how it ended was with a computer virus that took over every ship in the universe pretty much, and made ships sentient, and they fought against humanity. So it was Terminator all over again, right? But with spaceships. And that caused what's called the New Era, which is the era during this time where you have to avoid what they call the virus fleets or the vampire fleets, or I can't remember what they call them. But it just was incoherent. It really was. It was Dark Ages. It was Traveler's attempt to get with modern society's trend. The trend was to have dark role playing. You know, everything had to be, ooh, this is I'm doing it. There was a trend to play dark, everything dark. But that is not what Traveler was about. Traveler was about adventure and espionage and saving the damsel in distress, or uncovering, you know, an ancient artifact or something like that. And it had nothing to do with this dark BS. And that's why that whole thing might have been Traveler's undoing. And then Mark Miller came out with this version of Traveler called T4, 4th edition Traveler. where he took the lessons that he learned from 3, but didn't erase 3, didn't say 3 didn't exist, but now had a version of Traveller that took place after the virus fleets had pretty much perished and humanity was starting to rebuild and re-explore the systems and stuff like that. But us veterans that have been playing Traveller for generations, we didn't want that. We wanted the Empire. We wanted, the charted space. We wanted all those aliens and planets that we had been to be accessible, because and we wanted a threat from government, which is the big brother of the Empire. They would be like an overarching threat. So for me, T4, the mechanics of the game worked great, but the setting was not a good setting for me. And usually setting is what makes or breaks an RPG, not the mechanics. People can overlook bad mechanics if it's in a good setting. Even min-maxers and power gamers and munchkins can overlook a bad mechanic if the setting is good. Good role players want to role play in a world. They don't want to role play with a bunch of dice. That's not how you role play. So I don't think that was very successful. Steve Jackson, a very big Traveller player himself, got the rights to make GURPS Traveller, and there was a lot of books put out by GURPS, and his GURPS Traveller was, guess what, back in the Empire, and the setting was really good. But the mechanics to me were a little bit confusing, so I didn't ever play GURPS Traveller. I just got the source books for all the background material and stuff like that, the adventures. That was me personally. But GURPS Traveller was, it was GURPS. If you ever played GURPS, it was way too complicated. And then, and what else did they make? Then they made Mongoose. Mongoose made a version of Traveller. This was in 2007? Might have been 2007. They made the Mongoose Traveller, which Mongoose Traveller was a really good system. They went back to the original Empire era, expanded upon it by going into different areas of space, because there was one sector of space, the Spinward Marches, which is a sector that was all the adventures in previous editions would take place in that sector, kind of like the Forgotten Realms is now, where everything's taking place in the Sword Coast. That's kind of the way the Spinward Marches was. It was all the adventures were taking place in this one sector of space. So when Mongoose got a hold of the game, they started branching out into some other sectors. Now the problem with that, and there is a small problem with that, it's not fleshed out, right? And Mongoose didn't flesh anything out. So they ventured into another area of space, but left it vague. And that was, so I played Mongoose Traveller, but used the Spinward Marches. And then now they just recently came out with, like maybe a year and a half ago, Mongoose 2nd Edition. Mongoose 2nd Edition took the Traveller and they streamlined it. Basically made it more readable. The charts were understandable. Character generation was a lot quicker. Yeah, made it playable basically. And it basically became, in my opinion, the best edition so far. I'm looking at it and I'm like, wow, I like all these charts. I like the way the modifiers work and all that stuff. So yeah, but that's the topic of another video. Is going to be, I'm going to break down the Mongoose Traveller rules so that you guys can actually see what the rules are all about. And then there's one last one. It's called T5. It's by the original creator, Mark Miller. But I'm going to have to say something about this. I love Mark Miller. He got me into Traveler. Traveler's my #1 favorite role-playing game. But what got me into Traveler originally is what T5 is all about. But I'm an adult now. I'm not a high school kid with like nothing but extra time, right? I'm an adult now. I've got a job. I can't play T5. T5 is charts, tables, math formulas to figure out like how far your ship can go before it has to turn around and start slowing down so it doesn't like pass up the planet. And you got to roll the spectral luminosity of the planet, sun, and that'll determine like what the temperature is on the planet. And basically it just got into the minutia, right, of all this science, which is cool. Don't get me wrong, that's why I got into Traveler, was because of the minutia. But as I've grown and evolved, I have evolved into a streamlined Traveler like the Mongoose Traveler. Kind of like why I've been playing D&D 5th edition, because if you ask me to play 3.5 or Pathfinder, I'll tell you to go to hell, because that is way too complicated. Not that it's too complicated for me to understand. It's just too many rules all thrown into one, and I want a game to flow faster. I want new players to grasp it faster. I want to spend less time worrying about the rules and more time having fun role playing. And so that's why I don't play 3.5 or Pathfinder. And that's why when I saw 5th edition, I picked it up and enjoyed it. But we're taking a break from that. We're playing Traveler now. I got a contract apparently. But no. Okay, so you get the idea that Traveler's been around a long time, as long as D&D. It's gone through many editions, just like D&D. And the world that it plays in is a science fiction world where you can go to different planets, you can go to different solar systems, you can land on space stations, you can make drug deals, you can get cybernetics, anything you can think of, cyberpunk slash what's that Blade Runner, as well as aliens from the movie, anything like that, any science fiction that you want, you can put in your game. But the rules are focused on making it realistic. Like, I would think that Serenity was pretty realistic. I think Aliens is pretty realistic. I even think Babylon 5 was pretty realistic. They just had these jump gates. Okay, let's talk about unrealistic. There's a couple of things in Traveler that are unrealistic because you have to do it if you want to have a science fiction game. And one of them is the ability to travel between solar systems. They have what's called a jump drive, and it allows you to jump from one solar system to the next. If they didn't have that, then the game would be just in one solar system, and that would be kind of boring, right? And the second thing they have is what's called a fusion drive. Now remember, this is fusion back in 1977. Yes, there are fusion engines, or there's fusion power today, but not at the efficiency level or the energy output that the engines in Traveler are producing. So fusion, a super efficient fusion that just uses water, and then or hydrogen, and then there's jump drives, and that's pretty much it. Those are really the only things. There's nothing like matter transporters like in Star Trek. There's no faster than light travel. No, the way you jump is you disappear into a jump space and then you reappear, kind of like folding space, like in Dune, but it just takes a lot longer than in Dune. In Dune, it's like instantaneous. Okay, so that's pretty much what Traveler is. And if you have any questions about what Traveler is, or just continue to watch my Traveler videos. They're going to be coming out on a fairly regular basis. I've decided to go ahead and make a bunch of Traveler videos. Since I'm a Traveler fanatic, I might as well do it. And the second edition Mongoose Traveler has really inspired me to do this. Yeah, and plus I'll be doing some painting videos and stuff like that of some of the Traveler miniatures that I have. If you're looking for a science fiction game that is realistic and not science fantasy like Starfinder or some of these other games, then look into Traveler. Traveler is and check out the Mongoose second edition Traveler. Yeah. Or T5. T5. If you want all the charts, look up T5. If you want a streamlined, more role-playing-esque style game, then look at the Mongoose Traveler. All right, guys. Well, thanks for coming out and watching me drive around in Star Citizen, because that's what this video is. But I'll catch you next time. See if I can jump on this rock here. Let's do it. Denied.